thrill me.
This show is part of the Thrill Me Podcast Network. Experience more on Facebook and YouTube.
It's Review It Man, reviewing what he can. Movies are his jam, so let's get twisted, man. It's Review It Rob. Heyo, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Review It Rob show. I am your host, Review It Rob, coming at you with all of the goodies this week, man. Got a spoiler-free review of the latest horror film to hit theaters. That is Insidious, The Red Door. Giving spoiler-free thoughts on that on this episode as well. You got your mandatory DC talk. You got some mandatory horror talk and other news around the movie realm, man. If you can do me a favor, please hit that like, subscribe, share with all of your friends. This show, as well as the Thrill Me Podcast Network, we get all kinds of fun stuff going on over there. But no further ado, let's go ahead and jump in to this review, man, for Insidious, The Red Door, the latest in the Insidious film franchise. Quite possibly the last film in the franchise, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. Let's see. PG-13 for suggestive references, strong language, frightening images, terror, and violence. As all of us would hope with our horror films, it would be frightening images, terror. Horror mystery thriller film that is the trifecta. It is in theaters and it runs in at 1 hour and 47 minutes, matching pretty much all of the other Insidious films with that runtime, as they are all around that amount of time. In Insidious, The Red Door, the horror franchise's original cast returns for the final chapter of the Lambert family's terrifying saga. To put their demons to rest once and for all, Josh and college-aged Dalton must go deeper into the further than ever before, facing their family's dark past and a host of new and more horrifying terrors that lurk behind The Red Door. Rotten Tomatoes critics have rudely given this film a 35%, while the audience is sitting at a 71%, and IMDb gives it a 6.1 out of 10. If you're new to the show, I give those scores just to let you know everybody has differing opinions on how they feel about things. But speaking of that, what were my thoughts on the movie? So, man, I did a marathon of the films before jumping into Insidious, The Red Door, because I really haven't paid too much attention to the Insidious franchise before this film came out, but I was pretty, stoked and interested in seeing this film, so I'm like, let me go back and watch this. Now, I did see Chapter 3 in theaters when that released, and didn't remember hating it, and then I saw The Lost Key, I believe it's called, the fourth Insidious film, Redbox. I think it was like a Redbox rental, and I didn't hate that movie either, to be honest with you. So I watched those again, and still enjoyed them. Didn't really have much of a problem with them. The endings could have been better, sure, but didn't really have a problem with them. And I was like, cool, that's fine. Easy watches once again. And then I jumped into Insidious and Insidious Chapter 2 for the first time, which I know it's like backwards, but I watched it the Lambert family way. I watched it more the Lynn Shay way, if you will. Her character in the franchise is Elise, and the two films I just mentioned, Chapter 3 and The Last Key. Did I say The Lost Key earlier? The Last Key focus on her prior stories before going into the Lambert story, which is Insidious 1, 2, and then now The Red Door. Not 3, because again, there is a Chapter 3, which, I know it's all confusing. But I did enjoy the watch through. It was a fun little marathon to get me updated and ready to go, especially with the Lambert family here, as we're heading into this final story. First things first, I love and appreciate the fact that they brought back pretty much the original cast from the first Insidious film, including the kid who played Dalton, Ty Simpkins. Awesome that they did that. Sometimes it's tough bringing child actors back years later, but he has continued to act, looking at his filmography, and it was awesome that they, brought him back, and he does a great job in the movie. And of course, Patrick Wilson is always fantastic, right? Get some Patrick Wilson talk in the news later, but this is his directorial debut, and he did a really good job, man. I honestly thoroughly enjoyed this film from start to finish. What I like about and appreciate the Insidious franchise is that they know what they are. And, watching those 4 films leading into this one, and then watching this one, I knew exactly what I was getting into. and I knew the Insidious formula, if you will. Um, and they are very jump scare oriented, but they do a fantastic job at the jump scares. Like this is like legitimate jump scaring stuff. Like this isn't those stupid horror movies that try to get the cheap scare from you in movie theaters. With like a cat jumping across the screen. It makes a loud effect and it's all loud in theater and makes you jump and all that because it's a loud effect or just a big pop up here or there. Like the Insidious franchise has mastered like the jump scare aspect, and especially when you're going to the further. And we've all dealt with darkness, whether you're scared of it or not. You've all been in like a dark area at some point in time and felt a little unease. And they do a fantastic job with that, with the further and all that stuff. Now, talking about the film, synopsis earlier mentioned, you know, Patrick Wilson's character, Josh, and Ty's character, Dalton. Dalton's going off to college in this film, and, this where the story it very much goes, not to spoil anything from other franchises, but this is, of course, years after the events of Chapter 2 and the effects of everything that happened around them. And, I'm trying to avoid spoilers, so it's hard to talk about these things sometimes. But that's basically what happens going to the future, and those two have a strained relationship now. So and there's like a family relationship that's been strained because of all the events that have happened with the first two films. That's what kind of leads into the story. That's what I like about a lot of horror films. Like, yeah, there are some horror films that are just all about the gore and the scare factors and all that stuff, which is fine. That's cool. But I do enjoy a horror film when it gives you a story based in it as well as the scares. And this movie, I'm going to honestly say I think is my favorite of the Insidious films, especially after watching all of them in order recently. Like, I had an absolute great time with this film. Like, they hit on everything that you would kind of hope they would hit on. Of course, after the events that this family has gone through, they're going to be strained. They're going to be a little broken and all that stuff, especially when the younger kid doesn't remember things that have happened. The dad doesn't remember things that have happened. They're both going in this new direction as the kid is going to college, and that's always a strained relationship or a strained thing with parents, is that one of their child is leaving the nest, right, and they're going off onto their own, and they're going to be in their own place and all that. And of course, they've already got the strained relationship, and it's tough between them with all that. And they're trying to fight out through all that while trying to figure out what's going on with them mentally that they just can't remember that happened. So they do a really good job story wise in building out the tension between those two, because it's mostly Josh and Dalton's story, which it should be. They're the two main characters of the franchise. No offense to Elise, she's obviously a main character of the franchise as well. But when it comes to the Lambert story, it is mostly those two, and the focus is on them throughout the film, and very well done. And that's the positive of the story is the way that they wrote it to build into these areas that eventually come back around and engulf into each other and all that. But they did a fantastic job with the story for sure. Now, when it comes to the horror aspects of the film and all that, again, after watching all these films in a row, I knew what I was getting into, especially when we get into like the further aspect. The further is the place they go into um, with the lost souls, and they're trying to get the soul back and all that stuff. Like, you know what you're getting if you've seen the other films when you get into those areas. And what I appreciate about this film as opposed to the other films is while we do spend time in the further, it seems like they use the further a lot more in the other films to kind of cover areas, while in this film the further was used for plot a little bit better, if that makes sense. I feel like the way they use the further in this film fit. I mean, it's they fit the other films as well, but it played out a lot better in this movie than it did in the other ones. Where I think in some of the other films, especially The Last Key, the further was kind of used more as a shock factor kind of value, with the characters jumping out and scaring you and all that stuff, as opposed to in this one, there's a story and they're trying to figure out a mystery in a little bit here and there. That's where the mystery aspect of the film comes in. They're trying to figure some things out because again, these two characters don't remember the events, right? So they're through the story now, certain things are clicking and, leading them back to almost remembering things. And then they finally, you know, get to, scenes and all this stuff. Again, I can't spoil anything, so I'm trying to get around, talk around it. But they're trying to figure things are trying to be figured out in the film, and the further is kind of used to that degree in the movie, and is again really good. And that doesn't mean that there isn't terrifying or spooky images in the further in this film. I just think it wasn't used in this movie like it was used in the other films. I think it was used better in this film than it was in the other ones. And of course, when you're watching a horror movie, one of the main things you're looking for, at least you would think you're looking for, is how scary it is. And of course, I've become very desensitized to horror films as I've watched them for the majority of my life so far. And, not much scares me. But I will say there is this unease that you feel when watching these Insidious films, again, because that, the darkness factor or the demon factor or the scary, lost soul factor or whatever you want to, look at it as. There is the vibe that they put in these Insidious films as opposed to, other horror films that is just kind of gets you a little tense while watching it. While you're sitting there and you're just waiting and you know something's happening and you're like, and all that stuff. And there are some really strong images in the film, imagery. I don't talk about, cinematography and all that stuff. I, let other people talk about that stuff. I just gotta talk about the movie. I don't need to get all fancy with it, but there is some really good imagery in the film, and just everything builds and works around in its own perfect little bubble and element to it, and all that stuff. And I can say that I really did enjoy this movie. When I left the theater, I was like, "Is this my favorite horror film of the year?" Because for the longest time, if you've been with me on this show, Megan has been my favorite horror film of the year, and Evil Dead Rises, really strong up there. That film, unbelievable. Look at that, and crazy and wild that film is. Fits great with the Evil Dead franchise. Never been a big Evil Dead fan, but I really enjoyed that movie. And then here comes Insidious, the Red Door, and again, mentioned earlier, I kind of like the Evil Dead. It wasn't vast in the franchise. Like I saw a couple of movies and didn't see the others, but doing that whole lead up, watching the two Elise focus stories and then the two Lambert focus stories going into this final Lambert, apparently, supposedly final Lambert story, it was like this fun little cool little build up to where I'm like, this is a pretty solid horror franchise, man. And they're saying the final. I think it's more of a final for the Lambert story. I'm sure there will be more Insidious films. This was produced by Jason Blum, as well as James Wan and Lee Wanell, three people who do very well in the horror realm. And Jason Blum's always working on something, so I'm sure they'll figure out some kind of future for the Insidious franchise. There is a credit scene at the very end of the film. It's a couple of seconds long. Um, whether to tell you to stay there or not, that's not my job. I just tell you there's a little tease at the end, but I would say definitely stay to the Christ to hear that freaking awesome ghost song. Like man, stay with me. Oh my god, that song! As soon as that song released, because when I left the theaters, I was sitting next to my buddy while I was watching the movie. I'm like, I'm downloading the song ASAP, and it wasn't out yet. It wasn't fully available, but the next day, the next morning, it was out. I got an alert from no, I looked it up before I got the alert. YouTube eventually alerted me because I have YouTube Music. It eventually alerted me to that there's a new ghost song new song out that I may be interested in, and it was that song. But I looked it up, earlier in the morning because I'm like, oh come on, it's got to be out by now, and it was. And I've listened to that song. I kid you not, probably dozens, not dozens, freaking I don't know. I've lost count of how many times I listened to that song. Like that song was just on repeat for a long time, especially Friday. Pretty much all day at work Friday, that song was on repeat. That and the Olivia Rodrigo vampire song, but we'll talk about that later. Um, but it was mostly that ghost song. So yeah, stay through the credits, listen to that awesome song, and then see the little credit scene in there at the end. But overall, man, I really again enjoyed this film. It is definitely my favorite of the Insidious franchise. I like the story more in this movie. I like the horror and tense visuals and aspects and scares and all that stuff in this movie. Like I think this one, whether it be Patrick Wilson taking over the reins or what have you, and it's nothing against the Last Key. The Last Key wasn't the last Insidious film I watched, right? It was Insidious 2, which kind of like an Amityville horror kind of movie. I've seen that before, right? That's no real knock on two. Two is really good as well, but I've seen that idea. This movie, I like what they did, man. The trying to remember, trying to forget your past, but inevitably remembering the past demons. Um, the trying to grow, the trying to get better, the strained father-son relationship, the college atmosphere. That was an interesting add-in, and it worked. It wasn't one of those like dumb moments in a horror film. Like we've seen, if you watch a lot of horror films, you've seen dumb little added on like college parts or let's make it goofy kind of areas. And this one, it worked really well. I can't think of an aspect of the film that I didn't enjoy. And the runtime is fine. Like I mentioned, it's pretty much the same for all of the Insidious films. It's that runtime. So I'm into it, man. Like I really like this movie. I can't wait to see it again. I almost thought about seeing it again in theaters over the weekend. Like I'm into it. Like I really liked this movie. I like what they did. The film did um, beat Indiana Jones second week to be the number one movie in the box office. It has doubled its box office already. I don't know what it's made as the recording of this episode, but I know like they had a budget of $16 million and they already made 32 million in its first weekend. So they're already on a pretty good track to do well. And again, if that happens, they're gonna make more of these films for sure. And you can definitely play in that world a little bit more. You don't necessarily need the Lambert family to play in that world. You can definitely do other bridging stories and all that stuff, or create a new story within the already built franchise. Like this is a franchise that kind of blends itself to that ability and that option to kind of go in different routes while still staying true to the franchise. And hopefully it does stick to that way. But overall, The Red Door was a awesome freaking movie. As far as I'm concerned, it is terrifying and loving in the best way. So there you go. Those are my thoughts on Insidious: The Red Door, man. If you saw it, let me know in the comments what you thought of the film. 35% on Rotten Tomatoes. I do not understand. But that would not be the first time I did not understand Rotten Tomatoes scores. And I'm so thankful that I do not gauge my seeing of a movie based on such things. Like I don't know, like I don't know what people want with movies, man. Like I watched that movie, didn't felt like it went by pretty quickly. It starts off a little slow, but I mean most horror movies do that anyways. And as the tension builds and all this stuff builds and things are happening and the scares are coming and all this stuff, like it works very quickly and it works very well in my opinion. So again, we all have differing opinions. So what can you do? Moving over to DC and Patrick Wilson. Of course, Patrick Wilson plays Ocean Master in the Aquaman film franchise. He was, of course, the first film, and he is going to be in Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, releasing later this year. And he kind of teased, accidentally revealed, that reshoots have been happening for the film, which is set to release this December. So they're still doing reshoots, apparently. What he said is, quote, Orm is awesome. I was with him last week, end quote. Take that however it is. Maybe he was watching something or whatever. Maybe they are doing some reshoots. Maybe, hopefully they're cutting, what's her face out of the damn movie. But nonetheless, I've gone through a weird run with Aquaman to where I was not going to see the movie at all. 100% boycotting it to where I was like, I'll wait to see what my friends say about it. And, and then more reports have come out that what's her face is barely in the movie whatsoever. So I'm kind of like, okay, I guess I can see it in films, in theaters. I don't know, man. Like I love DC. I love Jason Momoa. So I want to go for those reasons. I like Patrick Wilson too. Patrick Wilson's dang good. So I'll probably end up seeing it. I'll probably end up seeing it. Now reshoots happening this soon. It's surprising to say the least. I don't know if it has anything to do with James Gunn or not. I mean, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But yeah, we'll have to see how that all goes. Now, speaking of James Gunn, we had a little talk from him. First being around the Doom Patrol show. Gunn, like many of us recently, has joined Threads, the new social media Twitter from Instagram. It's fine. I enjoyed it. I don't have much of a problem with it. Works pretty well. Over there, he was asked about Doom Patrol, to which Gunn had the following to say, quote, neck deep in Superman and Creature Commandos and wasn't focused on the day-to-day TV scheduling. Um, I can't imagine a world where completed episodes are not going to be released, he added. He comes back hours later to that thread that he sent out and said, update and confirmation as I surmise, no. Surmise? Yeah, surmise. No, Doom Patrol episodes are absolutely not being shelved, even though the premiere date for the next shows hasn't yet been announced to the public. End quote. So if you're worried about the Doom Patrol show or episodes that have been shot and not released yet, they will be releasing. So those are still definitely happening. Obviously not part of the DCU, right? But good on them, man. I still need to see that show. I haven't seen Doom Patrol yet, but seems like a lot of people enjoy that show or have enjoyed that show, and of course Brendan Fraser's part of it, so that's gotten more interaction and reaction recently with his Oscar run and all that. So we'll see Doom Patrol uh, soon enough, man. Let's see other news with James Gunn. A fan asked him over on Blue Sky, "What the flark is Blue Sky? Isn't that the women's wrestler in AEW? Was her name like Sky Blue? Flark, if I know, man." He was asked if what Superman-related songs would appear in the film, with one person suggesting "Kryptonite" by Three Doors Down. Gunn politely responded that he was sorry, but that's not going to happen. End quote. "Kryptonite" is a fantastic song by Three Doors Down, but I didn't think about that at all. Like, did not think about that song at all. Being, of course, when it comes to James Gunn, his films, people always bring up the soundtrack aspect of them, because James Gunn does a fantastic job with music in his films, and it's going to be interesting to see what he brings with him or to these DC movies with music. But I was not even thinking about songs in the Superman movie, to be honest with you. Kryptonite by Three Doors Down. That's hilarious. If I go crazy, would you still call me Superman? Yeah, I don't think that would. Nope. Yeah, I don't think that would work. All right, jumping over to the horror aspect. Jason Blum news. James Gunn, Jason Blum, Jason Gunn, James Blum. Um, got some news from him, of course, as he is always like James Gunn's always, around the DC news. Jason Blum's always around horror. Uh, Focused news as well, and this one kind of dealing with video games, saying he wants to make more video games into movies. Quote, "I think the right video games make great source material for movies. I mean, you saw that even with the Super Mario Brothers, it's a different genre, but it was an amazingly successful film." Blum says he wants to dig more into popular game franchises to come up with the next big horror movie, saying, quote, "Insidious director James Wan is actually a big gamer. We have a games division of our company that we've been working on," which is true. Blumhouse does have a game division they've been working on. I believe they're working with the God, I'm drawing a blank. The oh jeez, why can't I remember the name of you know what I'm talking about, the people who made Until Dawn, Supermassive. I believe they're working with them, or maybe right. I don't know, but say continue on the quote. "I'm definitely looking forward to finding more games that are popular and that we could turn into horror movies. They've already got one in mind, being Dead by Daylight. We couldn't be more thrilled to work with Jason Blum and James Wan, two giants of the horror film industry, to further expand the Dead by Daylight franchise," said Behavior's Executive Vice President Stephen Mulrooney. Quote, "At Behavior, our motto is to create unique moments together forever. Atomic Monster and Blumhouse are the ideal partners to craft Dead by Daylight's killer entrance onto the big screen," end quote. So, Jason Blum, we have Five Nights at Freddy's releasing later this week. Five Nights at Freddy's is a popular online video game that has had, again, very popular um, run, and is now eventually finally being turned into film. They released another trailer for that movie. Like, I'm into it. Like, it looks like it could be a decent enough film. I'm not sure at the moment because I haven't seen it, but it looks like it should be fine. And then, Dead by Daylight. Be interested to see how they turn that into a film. I'm sure it could work in some way, shape, or form, and I guess it would focus around the original characters in the game as opposed to the IP characters, which makes even more sense, even though, Blum does have Michael Myers on his side. Um, but yeah, there you go. I mean, they could maybe possibly make other horror movies out of video games. Sounds like a good time to me, man. Let's see. Just mentioned that trailer releasing. The Nun trailer is officially out for the Nun 2. Um, the first Nun film, don't honestly remember how I felt about that movie. I saw it in theaters once. It's the only time I saw it. I feel like I was fine with it, but it could have been better. Kind of like Annabelle, like fine, but it could have been better, right? Working with this new character that was a spin-off of the Conjuring universe, right? Where Annabelle we saw in the Conjuring, are like, oh, that's cool, let's get an Annabelle movie, and then they kind of had to figure out what they're going to do there. And then eventually with the second film they got better, and the third film really better. And then the Nun, which is a spin-off from the Conjuring 2, and the first Nun film was met with, I think, mixed reactions, mostly negative reactions, if I remember correctly. Um, So we'll see how the second one goes. Maybe it follows the trend of Annabelle. Maybe it doesn't. I don't know. But I'm excited either way. Like, you're telling me that you're making a film in the Conjuring universe? Cool. Keep giving it to me. I've not gotten tired of that universe whatsoever. Like, I thoroughly enjoyed that, man. I need to dive back into that Conjuring universe for sure. But just an absolute fun world to dive into, whether you believe it or not, whether you believe the stories are true or not. Who cares? They are movies, And I honestly think I've enjoyed every single one of them. There's definitely slow moments in them. Some are way better than the others, of course, but nonetheless, I've personally had a good time watching all of them. So, again, I've only seen The Nun once, so I do need to revisit it and all that, but I don't think it was all that bad. I don't know. Again, I haven't seen it in a while. Let's see. That does it for horror news. Jumping over to the other bits of news in the world before we close this thing out. Tom Cruise hopes to be making Mission Impossible films into his 80s. More power to him. I like Tom Cruise. And of course, Mission Impossible is hitting theaters this week, part 1. Remember, this is part 1. A lot of people were freaked out after they saw Across the Spider-Verse and were like, what do you mean? What do you mean this isn't over? Why do we have a concrete ending to this? Well, we got to do another one. Yeah, it was announced a while ago that the movie was split into other films. Um, Mission Impossible. This is part 1 that's coming out. Part 2 will come out later. But nonetheless, always excited for a Tom Cruise film. And that dude delivers. He cares about cinema. That's one of the things I've loved recently seeing with him and Margot Robbie. They're just going around seeing movies and talking about other films while doing press for their movie and all this stuff. It's like really cool to see the movie realm come together. So, she's been out there, taking pictures with Greta, who's the director of Barbie. They saw Oppenheimer. Of course, that's the big thing that's going on, Barbenheimer. Um, they saw Mission Impossible. Tom Cruise is, taking photos, seeing those films. Talked about how he's going to watch Oppenheimer and Barbie the same weekend. He took a photo in front of the Flash, even though he already saw the movie. All this stuff, man. It's been really cool to see that happening. So I've already loved Tom Cruise, love him even more because of this stuff. And as far as doing Mission Impossible films into his 80s, I'm sure he could figure out a way to do that. This is, of course, when they were talking about Indiana Jones and Harrison Ford being 80 and doing that movie and all that stuff. I think the big difference here, and I haven't seen Indiana Jones, but I'm pretty positive Harrison Ford wasn't doing his own stunts in that movie, while Tom Cruise famously does his stunts in his films, especially the Mission Impossible franchise. So we'll have to see how that all ends up working out, but more power to him, man. I'm always here for a Tom Cruise movie. Let's see. Benedict Cumberbatch. The next 2 stories are going to deal with Marvel here. Benedict Cumberbatch confirmed that he is scheduled to film some Marvel capers. That was his quote. Next year. So that's basically teasing a return for Doctor Strange. About a year after Multiverse of Madness. Is that movie only a year old? Huh. Seems longer. The rumors are thinking that it'll be for either Avengers: The Kang Dynasty, which I'm sure Doctor Strange would be in, or a project that will address Multiverse of Madness mid-credit scene. Did I say Multiverse of Magnets? What a movie that would be. Multiverse of Madness mid-credit scene involving Charlize Theron's Clea. Who knows? Maybe both. I don't know. I don't keep up with the Marvel stuff. Like that Secret Invasion show's been out for a while. Completely forgot it was even happening. So, eventually I guess I'll get around to seeing that. But jeez, I don't keep up with Marvel like I do DC. Sorry, not sorry. Other Marvel news: Jennifer Garner is set to reprise her role as Elektra in the upcoming Deadpool 3 film. I have not seen the Elektra movie or the Daredevil movies, I don't think. Did I? No, I did not. Maybe I saw bits and pieces, but no, I have not actually sat down and watched those movies. But that's cool. Good for her to be back. She's worked with Ryan Reynolds and, um, God, I'm blanking on his name too. But they did the Adam Project together. Sean Levy. Sean Levy. Um, So she's worked them before, so there's some chemistry there that'll work out. There is rumors of Ben Affleck's Daredevil being in Deadpool 3 as well. We'll see how that works out. What we do know is that Hugh Jackman is reprising his role as Wolverine, and some photos and videos have hit the internet of that shooting. I don't know how that stuff happens. I don't know why it happens at all, but I've tried my best to avoid it. But of course, in the social media world, it's hard to avoid those things. I just don't understand why things can't be a surprise anymore. Be it this or Halloween Horror Nights, spec maps, or whatever you want to do. Like, I just don't know why things can't be surprises anymore. It's weird. Nonetheless, good for Jennifer Garner returning to the role of Elektra. I see. Seth Rogen is teasing the Sausage Party sequel series. Oh my god. Oh Jesus. What a wild film that was. Uh, and talking about an unbelievably shocking scene. Of course, they had an unbelievably shocking scene in that first movie as well. Saying, quote, "There's one specific scene that had a special screening for the Amazon PR people for Sausage Party Foodtopia. You should all just start wrapping your heads around this now. You'll probably have to talk about this a lot," he continued. We had Kristen Wiig in picking up a few lines the other day, and I think we've all become desensitized to it because we'll just be like, roll the scene, and then she was like, oh my god, that's just insane. um, the sequel series is hitting Amazon 2024. Jeez. I have not seen Sausage Party I think that was another movie I saw once in theaters and have not revisited. But yeah, I remember that movie being in freaking insane. Um, that was a freaking wild movie to say the least, man. It's the sequel series on Amazon. More power to them. Let's see, another sequel. Apparently, Sony Pictures is reportedly developing a 21 Jump Street spin-off movie that would star Brie Larson reprising her role as Molly Tracy. Cool, fine. I completely forgot Brie Larson was even in 21 Jump Street. I think I've only saw those movies once as well, guys. I don't think I've spent much time with the 21 Jump Street films either. Definitely don't remember Brie Larson being in them. That's a shock to my system right there. But again, a lot of people hate Brie. I don't dislike Brie. I think she's fine. Love that song she did in freaking Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. So if they do a 21 Jump Street spinoff with her, cool. I'll probably see it once. And then final news here for a movie I will watch over and over and over again, especially now that it is hitting streaming platforms. The Super Mario Brothers streaming release has officially been confirmed as August 3rd for Peacock, and it will be joined by behind-the-scene cast interviews as well as an immersive field guide expanding the film through bonus features and a lyric video for the song sung by Princess Peach. Didn't say anything about Peaches. That's the lyric video we want right there. No, we just want the music video. Honestly, we don't want any lyrics popping up on the screen and messing up Jack Black's performance. But the Super Mario Brothers movie, it's so good, and I can't wait to see that again soon on Peacock. August 3rd, man. So there you go. That does it for this episode. There you go. Insidious the Red Door. Awesome movie. Thoroughly enjoyed that. You got your DC news, you got your horror news, and you got your other bits of news around the realm of movies. I hope you had a good time on the show. As always, I enjoy doing the show and appreciate any of you taking the time to listen to my random ramblings of the show. Again, please like, subscribe, share, rate it on Apple or whatever. So help get those numbers up. I don't care. To be honest with you, I don't care. I just do the show and have fun. But it would be nice if y'all did those things as well. Please share the Throw Me Podcast Network. We got all kinds of fun little goodies going on over there. Speaking of the Throw Me Podcast Network, Zach and myself got to be guests on the Horrific Network. We did a show over there talking Halloween Horror Nights. The upcoming event is like 60 days away. So excited for that. Y'all know that is something I thoroughly look forward to every single year. It's my biggest thing. And it is almost here, man, which means I need to start working out more. Yep. And go on a massive diet. But that's for another time. Maybe I can talk about that on this show and keep myself accountable or something. Who knows? Nonetheless, that's going to do it for the show. Appreciate you all. Hope you have a wonderful rest of the day, week, month, year. And always remember that happiness can be found even in the darkest of times if one remembers to turn on the light. Talk to you, beautiful people, all next episode.